Welcome to Ask Maureen, where we cover historical image analysis, genealogy, and how to work with your family photo collection. I'm Maureen Taylor, the photo detective, and I'll try to answer your questions. Good morning. And it is morning, and it is early here on the East Coast and even earlier on the West Coast, but it is afternoon in the UK. So welcome to the February 21st edition of the Photo Detective Podcast. You can watch the video on Facebook or listen to the podcast on iTunes. I love the Be Live platform because listeners can ask questions as we're live, and you can comment on the live post, and we'll answer them live, but you can also keep commenting and we'll check in and check it out later in the day and the week. Today, my guest is James Morley. He's a UK-based photo historian who created a very cool World War I photo resource. He told me about it over a year ago, I think. Maybe two. You've been working on it for a while.
Yeah.
But now it's a reality, and you can help his site win an award. So listen in for the details. And I know we have one listener because she's also in the UK. So it's not up early for her. So I'm hoping we get some other people. So this is James Morley. James and I met a very long time ago now. Time flies. At
10 years probably.
Yeah. Who Do You Think You Are live in London? It was the first time I went, and it was a wonderful experience. And as I wandered around the expo hall, there was this man in a scanning booth. And he wasn't doing the scanning, but there were people lined up or queued up, as they call it in the UK, to get his advice on photographs. And I thought, this is one person I have to meet. And here we have it. All these years later, I can't even remember how long ago that was. 10 years, maybe?
Probably 10 years, yeah.
Yeah, 10 years. 10 years. And then we had a booth at Who Do You Think You Are Live one year.
We did. We had a whole stand. That was fun.
Yes, we had a whole stand, and we decorated it, and we spent months planning it out. And we had, was that the year I brought the counter with me? 500.
Yeah, queues around the whole hall.
Queues around the hall, people waiting to talk with us. And it was really cool because James set up some display cases and actually put some of his collection out. And I should tell you that before we start talking about his World War I project, that James is a photo collector extraordinaire. He finds the most amazing images and adds them to his collection. So how many photos do you think you have, James?
I honestly don't know. If my office wasn't such a mess, I'd span the camera around and you could. Well, I know, for example, one lot I've got contains 70,000 negatives. So that's an idea of that lot. But I think in terms of like cased images, ambrotypes, daguerreotypes, tintypes, ferrotypes, if you call them that, I've probably got about 300 or 400, something like that.
Yeah, but 70,000 negatives.
And then negatives, and in terms of print images and carte de visite, I must have probably 10,000 carte de visite cabinet cards in various albums and not in albums and everywhere. So
oh my God, it makes my guest room closet collection look pretty tiny.
Makes my wife rather.
I know what the spouses don't know about our photo collecting habits. They don't need to know. And when the last time I was in London, which was about a year and a few months ago, we actually got to catch up and have dinner. Yeah. And you gave me a beautiful autochrome because I had told you that I didn't have one for my collection. And it's a prized part of my collection now. I just love it. It's flowers. It's beautiful. But we also had a lot of time to talk about this new project. So his new project is called, and he has other projects, but today we'll talk about this one, which is called A Street Near, if I could type this morning, Street Near You. So James, let's talk about A Street Near You. How did you come up with this idea?
Well, I was working at the time at Imperial War Museum a couple of years ago, and So for anybody who doesn't know, that's the main sort of military conflict related museum in centre of London, but also has branches elsewhere in the UK. And my main role there, as it has been working in all the sorts of museums that I work in, is to help them put their collections online and do better things with them. So I was working on these massive image collections, but also, of course, with that, you end up working on projects that are using those collections. One particularly was called Lives of the First World War, which was a centenary project, which is just coming to a conclusion now. But that was crowdsourcing and getting people to contribute everything they know, all the records they could find, whether it was military history or genealogy or anything. And just through that, was exposed to all this just incredible data. And it's the data that sort of piques your interest and makes you want to kind of find out more. And to cut a long story short, I mean, one of the main sources of records was the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. And they just have these tantalizing little bits in their database that's just called additional information. But it will have these little things like son of John and Hilda Smith of 23 Hill Rise, Hatfield, Hertfordshire, and husband of, and then give another address of the wife and so on. And you just think, well, where are those places? And they have over 1 million records for the First World War, and about 600,000 of those have those sorts of entries. So that was really what wasn't really very short description, but that's what caught my interest.
That's all right.
Was just trying to understand where those places were, and in some cases, literally thinking of it as the last door that somebody walked out of before they went off to the Western Front to fight.
So if you had to summarize what A Street Near You is about, how would you do that? Well,
I've called it exploring the local impact of the First World War, because I think that's certainly, as well from the reactions, it seems to have hit that nerve in everybody in their communities, because the First World War is typically portrayed as trenches and something that happened in, well, particularly the Western Front, France and Belgium, but also obviously the Eastern Front, and down in Africa and so on. But what people didn't realize is just the scale of the impact that it would have had on the communities where people were living. And that was everything from big cities like London, where I live, right through to the smallest village. Someone from everywhere, essentially. I think somebody worked out that there was only about 2 parishes, and the parish is not very big in this country, where no one died in the First World War. And it's that scale of impact, where you could, I mean, essentially the site now allows you to look up your street, and you might find, I mean, on my street, a couple of records in 100 houses of someone who died who came from that street.
It's an amazing project. I can't even imagine it. So we should share
amazing data. That's what.
Yes. So my guest today is James Morley, a UK-based photo historian. We've known each other for about a decade now. And he has created an amazing World War I resource that I'm going to share with you. Just give me 1 second while I share my screen. Applicate Chrome tab. Street Near You. You won't believe it. Plus, you get to vote for it. And I'm going to share my screen. Make that big. Here we go. So if you go to the URL astreetnearyou.org, you will find this, and I advise you to do it and take a look. So when you pull it up, it's this most amazing thing because it's plotted on Google Maps, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I used a free version.
Right. So explain how you made this happen, if you can.
Well, the underlying data has been extracted from a number of sources. So the basic or the core location information is all from Commonwealth War Graves records. They don't have geolocations as such, not sort of latitude, longitude data. So I had to extract it, all those little addresses, son of so-and-so of 23 Hill Rise, and use what they call reverse geocoding to get the latitude and longitude. And then they're plotted on the map but what I've done is integrated it with a few other sources. So the Lives of the First World War project has a lot of information about individuals, and people might have added personal family memories. They might have added photographs, stories, census records. So much information has been stored on that site. And then the final set of data, if you like, that was added were the photographs, and a lot of the photographs have come from the Imperial War Museum's collections, and they have about 16,000 portraits of Commonwealth soldiers. So that's where you look here and you see those photographs. That's where they've come from, and all those three sources together have meant we've now got about I think it's about 500,000 different location records for about 400,000 different people.
Wow.
Just from the Commonwealth side of the conflicts, which is worth stressing, particularly to your audience.
So if someone is looking for, it looks like on this site, you can search by an address. So if they know, or the postal code, if they know where they're looking at, say, what would it be? The 1911 UK census, and they know where their family was living and they have the address, they can search that address in the search box.
Yeah.
And then, so let's go to some of these faces first, because it's just amazing. So let's go, and you really can see that this World War I was a worldwide conflict. We've got a few people over here in the US, but then you have these people in South America, Africa, India, basically the British Empire. So let's click on this guy right here.
Looks like he's in Portugal or somewhere.
Right, explore the location.
So that will zoom you in to everyone that was represented by that kind of pin on the map.
We can go in further.
And you have to go in further.
Okay.
And then you start finding individual records. And you see, sometimes like here, you'll see the same face occur twice. That's because there are two addresses associated with his record.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and then when you click on that, you can see that that face is associated with Captain George Whiteley Reed of the Hampshire Regiment. And then you do not have a picture of Lieutenant Alfred, I don't even know how to pronounce that English name. Chegwin?
I can't even read it on my screens.
It's Chegwin, Flower, Lieutenant Alfred Flower. And if we click on Captain George Whiteley Reed for the selected record, you have the image source citation, which is just fabulous. The date of his death, the additional information that he was son of George and Alice G. Reed of the Vila Nova de Gaia, Portugal, where he was born. That is
where this location.
Yeah, that's what it's pinned to.
Yeah.
And then when you go, then it's even more interesting, because tell me what. So you mentioned Lives of the First World War.
Yeah.
View the life story. 8 facts, 2 sources. What is all that about?
So, I mean, a lot of the site, even though it's very powerful in itself, a lot of the intention was to provide links out to the source material, to other sources. So, in all of these cases, what it's done is it said, okay, so here's this guy, here's where he was from. What do we know about him? Well, through sites like Lives of the First World War, we know that this is his record on that site. We also can predict whether there's perhaps other images of him in the collection. We can do a names match and see if his name appears on any war memorials and that sort of information. So as a finding aid, so that people can just visit and then go off and follow their own journey and find other material. That was essentially what's at the heart of all of these records. And I'm working on a few more sources at the moment, particularly the more specific regional sources. So many First World War centenary projects that have happened that have produced unbelievably rich data. So I'm looking at the moment at integrating a lot more of those records. So
for Captain George Whiteley Reed, we have a citation for the Lives of the First World War as a citation with some additional information. The Commonwealth War Graves Commission Cemetery.
Yeah.
The Imperial War Museum collection, 0 matches, and then the War Memorials Register. So those are all the collections that you currently are connecting, right? Very good. We have a few questions, which I knew we would.
Where am I seeing the questions?
Oh, I'll show you. Don't worry, I can push them out to the screen. So Deborah Stock, who is actually one of my UK followers, says, presumably because the records came from the civil, what is that?
Commonwealth War
Right.
Graves Commission, even I can't say.
Commonwealth War Graves Commission. All of the individuals died in World War One.
Yes, essentially, currently. And I am looking at, because quite shortly I'm hoping that all of the data from the Lives of the First World War project will be made as open data. And through that, I can actually start to pick up addresses that have been added to that site for people who survived as well, because it's a very common sort of issue that you find out a lot more about someone if they died, and it's much harder to find out about the people who survived. But the Lives of the First World War site has 7.5 million records in it. So, I'm hoping that there'll be some good location data in there, and you'll actually be able to find not just the people on your street who died, but also the others who potentially served.
Right. I mean, I have to say that it is a very exciting time to be a photo historian with your project, the Civil War Photo Sleuth project, the old PVD project I created. I mean, there's so many ways that we are now using technology and linking it to location and people and history. Yeah. There's going to be a lot that comes out of this for genealogists and historians. So Deborah has one more question for you, which is, any thoughts of expanding to include people who served but survived?
That was essentially what we were just saying. Definitely. If there's data out there and I can access it, and the people who are sharing it have released it under a license that allows reuse. Obviously, none of this is commercial, so that's not an issue. This is completely self-funded and done in my spare time. But if people can point me to other data sources, I'm already looking at some, for example, for Anzacs and some Canadian War Memorial data as well. And thankfully, in this sphere, particularly, for example, in Australia and Canada, people are very open with the data. So I'm hoping that will be something that I can, when I have the time, dip into a lot more and add a lot more depth to it. And some of the locations, in terms of locations of embarkment when they set off on the ships and so on, they're just those sorts of things, I think, again, bring the numbers and the whole stories to life.
So here's a couple more comments, just because I think you're going to love them. June Butka says, wow. And that's how I feel about it. Wow. I can imagine this when you started talking about it. Like, how was this going to work? And yet it's amazing. And then, and we have another comment for you. What a wonderful way to honor these soldiers. It's pretty amazing, James.
Yeah, that's nice when people say things like that as well. So
let's go back to the site. So my guest this morning on this Facebook Live is James Morley of A Street Near You. He's a UK-based photo historian. And I'm going to go back to the site and get out of Captain George Whiteley Reads. So that was zooming in. And then at the bottom, so we can just zoom out using the mouse, right?
Yeah.
Just keep zooming out.
Do you want me to suggest a quick search for you? Because I know a couple of good records.
I'm just waiting for the page to reload. Here we go.
Yeah, it can be a little bit slow.
Well,
it's a lot of records it's got to find. So
what is this in the US? That's I'm going to scroll out just a little bit more. Here we go.
Yeah. I think the thing to be a little wary of with the US records is where you had addresses where the lookup for an address couldn't find an exact match. It does a sort of a best guess. And I mean, there are even some wonderful records where you have like a house called Hollywood, but it was in Torquay in Devon or something, or it could have been on Edinburgh Road, but it was in in the south of England or something. And in those cases, it particularly seemed to like reverting back to guessing in some place in the US rather than anywhere else. So there is a report feature. So if you find a record and you go, well, that's not there, then you can report it, and that will take it off the site, and then I'll review it and put it in the correct location if I can.
Okay. So just for a moment, let's look at this North America. So are these UK, like British soldiers? Or American?
Primarily, yes.
Okay.
There are mainly people who had connections to the US or Canada. Obviously, a lot of Canadian records there as well. And you know, as was the case at the time with Australia and India as well, is if the people there were of British ancestry, they felt the need or the desire to do their service, to do their bit, and so they then returned to the UK, enlisted with a regiment, probably from the area where they were from. Mm-hmm. But of course, if the record said that the addresses are typically next of kin and they were recorded after the war, so that's why several hundred, even thousands of records are in North America.
So actually June says that her uncle served with the UK forces. June, you might find him on this site. I don't know if he died.
If you use the filters, you can look up for a surname.
Great. So. All right. So you were going to give me an address to search.
Just type in Felix Road, so Felix.
And hit the search.
And you might need to type in Ealing, EALIN, which is where I live. I don't live in Felix Road, but I'm just around the corner from there. Hopefully that
nothing found.
Okay. Well, that's not much good. Try Felix Road W13, which is the start of the postcode, as we call them, zip code.
There we go.
Yeah.
About London.
Yes, that should be okay. Again, it's tiny on my screen, so I can't really see. Yeah,
right.
Here you go. And if you go to the record,
you
go to the record there with the photograph.
All right, I'm going to click on one, and we have two people that lived at that address: Private Herbert Edward Lepage and Gunner Lepage. So maybe they were in the same family. And actually, you have a picture of Herbert alone and one with his brother.
Yeah.
And when you click on that, again, you go to this amazing resource, an overview of where information on this man is in these 4 resources. Amazing. You show where he's buried, and then again, lives of the First World War. Now we haven't done this kind of thing here in the U.S., though we weren't in the war long enough, for very long.
Yeah.
But
yeah, these two records there were brothers.
Yes. So you can find out additional information about that. We did have another question, which is from Ann Clayton. She wants to know, have you searched newspapers.com at all?
I don't know newspaper. The British Newspaper Archive is behind a paywall, so there's no open data that I could extract from that. Is newspapers.com the same as that, or is it
no
wider?
It's different.
Okay.
It's different. You can actually subscribe to it.
Right, but if it's a subscriber resource, then it's going to be hard to do that. Although again, if they provided a sort of a open search interface, then there's no reason why that couldn't be done. The key thing will be trying to extract named known individuals from that. Mm-hmm. And that will entirely depend on how they've got their metadata set up.
Right.
Because it's one thing, obviously, to look up a name like Lapage or something in a resource manually, but to try and match that against the 500,000 records that are in there is an entirely different proposition, really.
Right. Right, because you're using open source material so that
Yeah, by its nature, it's
anyone can look at it.
accessible and free, and I know I can reuse it without any issue. Although I'd hope that a lot of these resources, another one that is technically commercial is the Commonwealth. I'm trying to remember the exact name of it, but it's the War Graves Photographic Project,
Ooh.
where people have gone out and taken photographs of gravestones, and there you have to pay to get a high resolution or a print version of the image. But I hope, for example, that they would allow me to put the thumbnails on here, because at the end of the day, it will drive traffic to their site. But it would be a very nice addition if people could, through here, also see a picture of that person's gravestone. And that is data that should have a direct link to all of these records, because it's also based on the Commonwealth War Graves records.
Now, your site is up for an award if you get enough votes.
Yeah.
And so first off, I want to ask you, what do you have coming in the future? I think you mentioned this morning that you're eventually going to have a way for people to sign up and then get an alert.
Yeah, there's two things. One hangs off the other. The first one is just a very significant upgrade in the number of records that are there. And that's both the number of locations and the number of people, but then also the associated data with them. So more links to the Lives of the First World War project, more photographs, potentially more stories. So a lot more rich content on the site. And in time, as we've already said, lots of other potential data sources to add. But then linked with that, what that sparked the idea for me was that people should be able to subscribe on the site to get alerts, and that could be for a particular area, it could be a village or a town or something, or it could be for a surname or any other combination of searches. And basically the idea is that people could subscribe, and then every week they could get, if there were any new records, they'd get an email that said, hey, you know, there's this new photograph of this person in your village, there's new this. And it's not too complicated to deliver. It's taking me a bit of time, but we're getting close to that. So that's really exciting, because I think you know, the site in its first 3 days after launch was a little bit viral. We had close to 250,000 people visit the site in 3 days, which was pretty extreme, and kept me busy over the whole weekend. But since then, we're getting, you know, a good few hundred people every day still visiting the site, and I'd like to sort of keep on developing it and growing it and adding new features so that people, particularly you know, those interested in their local communities and family history and so on, are able to get at these records a lot more easily, because it's easy to look at a source once and then not go back to it because you've moved on and you're looking at other things. But if you get a little reminder that there's new content, then I think that will really engage people. So yeah, so that's what we've got planned in the next week or so, hopefully.
Yes. Now, I've been trying to get you on this podcast for a few months. So this morning when I said you're up for an award, let's get you on the podcast, you were like, okay, I'm free today. So that's why we have this special broadcast at this time of the day. And I have to ask, I know Deborah has this question, and I know I do too. How long has it taken you to put this together?
There's two answers to that. I mean, I've been looking at it for about 2 years. I did a very initial attempt in my local area for Armistice Day 2017, so year and a bit ago. And it was the reaction to that gave me the enthusiasm to carry on and try and do it at a global scale. So over the rest of the year, I was gradually, because all these sort of services whereby you can look up addresses and so on have their free limits, and after that you start paying big money to try and get it done. So I was doing about 40,000 records a month, just trying to get this data up to date. I mean, it would only take a few hours to do that, or overnight to do it, but I couldn't do any more because otherwise it would cost me a fortune. So that happened over the course of 2018, essentially up to November. But the site itself, I literally started, I think, on the Friday evening, and I went live. I started building it, had all the data in place, but started building the website on the Friday evening and went live the following Friday evening. So it was an intense week of building the interface and the sort of the user interactions and so on that led to what it is now. So yeah, it was all good fun.
Deborah wants to know, do you sleep?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry for laughing when you were going through the statistics of, how much material you have to add. I know with my old PVD site, I have at least 500,000 images to put up there, and
yeah.
It's sort of me, and it's not going up fast enough, but it'll get there, I imagine. I'm going to have to try to find some local volunteers.
I mean, that's the beauty of working with other people's data, is you don't do the very labor-intensive bits of digitization and adding metadata, cataloging, and so on. So, these resources are just sitting there, and if the owners have given you permission to use them, then it's just incredible what is there and you can use. So,
well, your site, A Street Near You, is definitely a testament to that now.
Yeah.
So people can vote for your site, and I saw that posted on your Facebook this morning. So yes. I'm going to share this.
I was going to say, you can share the link.
I can share the link. I'll share the link on Facebook.
I can build websites, but I've never done a Facebook Live before, so I've not got a clue what I'm doing here.
You're a technical person. I had no doubt you'd be able to make this work. So DH Awards, Digital Humanities Awards 2018, and this is on Google Docs, so you can search it using DH Award, the Digital Humanities Awards 2018. And then you have to enter your name and your email address. And then there's all kinds of sites that you can vote for. And I have a feeling that this is what I'll be doing for the rest of the day, is clicking on all these links, because there are sites I never heard of before.
There's some brilliant stuff there.
Brilliant stuff.
Obviously vote for me, but
yeah, you can vote for A Street Near You, but you can also vote for the Civil War Photo Sleuth in a different category.
In one of the other categories. So
so you don't have to choose. At first I was afraid I'd have to choose between you and the Civil War Photo Sleuth. And then I realized that you were in different categories. And then there's blog series and series of blog posts. So I am going to be very busy today, and I think I'm going to try to get some of these people as guests on future Facebook Lives. So if you are not a newsletter subscriber of mine, and you can subscribe on MaureenTaylor.com, you might want to sign up so that you can be the first ones to get notice of some of these projects and events that I have a feeling I'll be talking about in the future. So, James, this would be very cool. Voting remains open until the end of Sunday, 3rd of March, 2019. Yeah. Who is behind the Digital Humanities Award?
It's actually just an independent group that just set it up, which is quite nice, because I was encouraged to apply for other awards, and then they sort of say that you have to be part of an organization and you have to pay to enter and so on, whereas there's absolutely no prize. It's just the honor of being involved and hopefully winning. And yeah, they just invite other people within the sector to propose. I know, for example, someone at the National Archives that I know nominated me for this, or A Street Near You, for this site, just completely out of the blue found out, so it's just people within the sector who just want to reward and sort of showcase what's good out there, which is really nice. There's no prize, there's no money, there's no big glitzy presentation or anything. It's just it's just nice.
It's recognition.
Yeah, exactly.
Of a job well done. I hate to ask, but I'm going to, because I know you. Are you just working on this at this point, or do you have another project you're cooking up?
This is it in terms of projects. I have to try and earn a living as well. So I'm currently got a 3-day-a-week contract working back where I started out my career, really, which is at Kew Gardens.
Which is the National Archives of the UK.
No, Kew Gardens. So the Botanic Gardens.
Oh, the Botanic Gardens, the actual gardens.
Yeah. Which is just across the road from the National Archives, but it's entirely different. Interesting looking in a project looking at the way museum objects have been circulated around the world since sort of 1850s. So another sort of very data-driven, data-led project. But yeah, this is at the moment filling my spare time. The problem is I'm not making enough money, so I'm going to have to get a little bit more paid work to try and subsidize this. But ultimately, we'd love to put it together as a project for funding as well to continue it and grow, make sure it continues to grow.
I know that.
Yeah.
I know that old PVD is self-funded and expensive. But we are passionate about our projects, and we love old photos. So, all right. Well, my guest today has been James Morley, a UK-based photo historian. We've known each other for about 10 years from Who Do You Think You Are Live? And James, I have any more questions for him before we sign off. But James, I do wish you lived around the corner so we could have coffee on a regular basis.
That'd be fun.
That would be very fun. And we could invite all the other photo historians we know in the UK and get them all together and have a real coffee clutch.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Well, thank you very much for joining me on the spur of the moment. And I hope all of you enjoyed this. If you didn't have a chance to watch it live, you can watch the recording on my Facebook page. You can catch it as a podcast on iTunes. And if you're on my newsletter list, you'll get the first notification of when it's available. James, thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for watching and listening. You can submit your questions for future episodes using the Ask Maureen button on MaureenTaylor.com. or through any of my social media contacts. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram as The Photo Detective, and on Facebook at Maureen Photo Detective. I hope you'll come back for the next show. Don't forget to send me your questions.